Good evening, everybody. If anybody is still there, apologies. I was just about to hit the go live button and a technical apocalypse happened. Everything dropped, everything disappeared. I was using work systems for notes and everything, so I know now why I used to write everything out. I think I might stick with that going forward. But good evening. We're going to try and get through some of chapter 18 ultimately, because we haven't got the full amount of time. It will be a case of doing a shortened version so we don't take too much from the Zoom meeting. So I'll share what I can. It certainly won't be everything that I've got prepared, but I will start off just checking to see who's on. He says, trying to get his technology to work. Apparently I've just gone live. Bear with me. Apparently I've just gone live. Hi Jenny, I'm glad I got it working as well. I think it might be a short and sweet overview on this, so we can give it the time and the effort it deserves. But thanks for coming on. Just had a message off Dave. Yeah, no problem, mate. I'll just do about 15 minutes, and then we can move across to the Zoom meeting. If somebody could share the link, that would be great. I think there's only 3 of us on, truthfully, but chapter 18, follow on from chapter 17, where David shared that fantastic overview of everything with regards to him praying, Jesus praying, not just for himself, but that God would be glorified. And he prays for himself, he prays for the believers. That's the guys he's hanging around with at this point, but also prays for ourselves. On this chapter, they've got up, having done all the praying, and they've headed across the Kidron Valley over towards Gethsemane. Apologies if I'm looking over the camera. It's all my notes are up there. Had it more eye level, but going forward, we'll certainly get things better, and certainly make sure everything is still working. So the Kidron Valley, that's a deep ravine that runs between the temple wall and the Mount of Olives. And Jesus and his disciples crossed this ravine to the garden in the Mount of Olives, known as Gethsemane. It was a common place for them to go, to retire, to chat, for Jesus to pray, definitely. Not an easy climb, apparently. And according to some of the writers I've been checking up on to prepare for today, Kidron means dusky and gloomy, because of the gorge being in the shadow of the walls, etc. No light ever gets down there, and it's a place that was often stained with the blood of the sacrifices. And as we're in Jerusalem at the time of the Passover, there's a lot of sacrifices going on, a lot of blood seeping down the hills. It's a dark night. We're told that the people that were arresting Jesus in the passage had torches and lanterns. They carried weapons. It was cold. In the passage we read about Peter warming himself by the fire. Judas the betrayer was leading the way before this large group of people. And we know the story about Jesus being arrested in the garden and what it leads on to, going before the the high priest, going on and then being executed as an enemy of Rome. It's a passage that seems very, very sparse compared to a lot of the other passages that we would read in other Gospels. It just talks about Jesus having prayed. He went to the garden. We don't get the account of him struggling in prayer. We know he's stressed, but we don't have that account of him struggling. And we don't have the account of him sticking the servant's ear back on as well. What I'll do is I'll go through the passage itself. I'll only read through as far as Peter's denial. That way then we can take a look at a few things and then move through. So John 18, I think it's 1 to 28, 1 to 29. So when he'd finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. This is a great verse. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it that you want?" Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. "I am he," Jesus said, and Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and they fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you're looking for me, then let these men go." And this happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those that you gave me." Then Simon, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. And Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me?" Then the detachment of soldiers with its commanders and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him, brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders it would be good if one man died for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus because this disciple was known to the high priest. He went in with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple who was known to the high priest came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty, and brought Peter in. "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" she asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servant and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter was also standing with them, warming himself. Meanwhile, the high priest Annas questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus replied, "I have spoken openly to the world. I always taught in the synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me, surely they know what I said." When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. "If I said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon was still standing warming himself. So they asked him, "You aren't the one of his disciples too, are you?" And he denied it, saying, "I am not." And one of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Again, Peter denied it. And at that moment, a rooster began to crow. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they all wanted to be able to eat the Passover. It's a story that we all know. The one thing that jumped out at me was that verse 4, with Jesus knowing all that was going to happen to him, he went out and asked them, who is it that you want? That kept popping up as I was studying, as I was investigating different things. And there is so much, if we look at it from a human point of view, Judas turning up with this troop of men seemed a bit over the top. It says he was guiding a detachment of soldiers. A detachment of soldiers in Roman times, excuse me, was anywhere between 40 and 200. 40 is not bad. Well, it's still bad considering he never made any threats to the higher ups or the chief priests and things like that. But can you imagine if you turned up with 200 plus all the Jewish leaders, temple guards, and things like that? What were they expecting? That's my question. What were they expecting? They were armed up and had lanterns so they could see in the dark. They had torches so they could stick the torch in the tree roots to see who was hiding. But Jesus wasn't hiding. He didn't need to hide. He stepped forward and said to them, who is it that you're looking for? And taking on the name of God, he says, I am he. You've got up to 200 of Romans veteran soldiers, because the army of Judea was not a new blood army. It was one of the old, or two of the old legions that were posted out there. He sent the veterans out. Caesar sent the veterans out so they could, get in hard, get it sorted, and come out again. Only it didn't happen that way. But investigating this passage, there's two things that you can take from it. You've got the legality of the process that Jesus went through. You have got the amazing power of God and the presence of God that causes these battle-hardened troops who are used to standing in mud, locking shields and driving a screaming army backwards. This guy just said, I am he. And they all hit the floor. Judas, the soldiers, the religious scholars that had come out to witness things. It was just an amazing, amazing show of the power of God. And you would see there are examples of people in God's presence hitting the floor. Moses, Aaron, for example, Isaiah, I am not worthy, I'm but a sinful man. So he hits the floor. John in Revelation, when the angel appears to him, he says, get off your face, talk to me, things like that. They came there fully expecting to have the upper hand. And instead of Jesus being on his knees, tied up in ropes, chains, whatever they were going to bind him with, we had all the troops, all the religious idiots, I've been referring to them in my notes, and getting belittled, not belittled, wrong word, humbled by God's presence in the form of Jesus. It's an amazing, amazing story. But what's even more amazing is when Jesus says to them the second time, who is it that you want? They reply, Jesus of Nazareth. He says, I am Jesus of Nazareth. I am God again. If it's me you're coming for, let these people go. Now, the phenomenal thing when you look in the background, the words used to let those people go, it's in the same sort of phrase as forgive them, they've got nothing to do with this. Take me, forgive them, let them go. Jesus steps up, as he said in verse 4, knowing exactly what is going to happen. He knows the process he's going to be going through and knows the outcome. Now, I found this amazing document about the trial of Jesus and the legal side of things. I can't do it justice today, but effectively, pretty much everything we read in this account and the other accounts, totally illegal. No grounds of legality whatsoever. It's just a travesty, effectively, that everything that happened shouldn't have happened. And when you look at how unjust the situation was, of what Jesus ended up having to do and to say prior to being sent to Pilate, if we were just talking about a normal man, there would not have been a conviction. Or if the conviction stood, there would be a very quick appeal. It'd be the equivalent of basically of our police these days not giving the rights as they're being arrested. Because when you look at the passage and what is said about the time, what happened in the arrest, where they went, being struck, being questioned, all of this went against their law. As the accused in those days, you were automatically assumed that you were absolutely guilty until you were proved, sorry, wrong way around. You were absolutely innocent until evidence can be proved that can prove your guilt. And that evidence had to be reliable and from two people. You couldn't be convicted by one person's word. It gets rid. But when you look at in the garden, they were arrested, illegal. There was no charge held against Jesus. Nobody did witness Jesus doing anything. So when they arrested him and bound him, that in itself should never have happened. The fact that everything was happening at night, they were looking for a capital result. They were looking for a death sentence. The Jewish law, their law, said things like that. Capital cases can only be tried within daylight. And bearing in mind, this was a holy day or holy season, their law says no legal processes can happen on a feast day or a holy day. So it was dark, there was no charges. The individual doesn't have to say anything. You weren't expected to try and justify yourself on the grounds that it's not right to make you say something that will incriminate you or make you as a witness. And as I'm reading through this, I'm getting more and more annoyed about it. But I look up and I see verse 4, all this illegal activity, all of this illegal process. But verse 4, we read Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, who is it that you want? Phenomenal. He knew what he was going through. He would do, wouldn't he? He wrote the book. Or he was the author or an author with God and the Holy Spirit. It's just an amazing, amazing account. And when you look at Jesus's trial in greater depth through the other gospels, it makes you more and more angry seeing how they go against their own law when it suits them. It is 25 to 9. There is so much more I want to share, but I think we need a proper full night of working gear, starting early enough. So for now, I'll leave it just at that point, just a little summary. And next time, if Dave's okay with this, I'll pick up again and go into it in some greater depth, just so you can see that into it in a bit more, with a bit more understanding. If anybody wants to know beforehand, just message me and I'll send you the link to the legal document. It was a legal review of a conference of solicitors back in 2016, and the one person who was responsible for the comment is looking at it. I read somewhere the other day that there is somebody who is trying to challenge the Israeli government to review Jesus's trial. I understand what they're looking to do to get it corrected, but it's not going to help, really, is it? Even though everything was illegal, even though everything they did was wrong, even though Jesus spoke in defense of himself when he didn't need to, Jesus, knowing all things that were going to happen to him, went out and asked, "Who is it that you want?" Join me again so we can do this properly. It'll be next time, won't it, Dave? Next Wednesday. And I'll see you on the Zoom meeting, those that are going to go through. God bless. He says, trying to turn everything off. There we go. See you later, everybody.